join us, call at 800 433 8850. Send mail to our show at WA.org, or follow us on Facebook or Twitter. And thank you all for being here on this day. Morning.
Thanks, Dan.
Good to see you all. Very sad the Bowe Bergdahl big and really quite fascinating. President not apologize for the prisoner swap. Do we know about his the details of swap?
Well, I think we know that the idea of this swap generally back under discussion for more than that. It didn't come to pass for various paths. And not thought to be a good idea by Obama earlier. I noted proof of life video that was last year of deteriorating. And they got written insurance with Alabama, gutter in writing, hard to find earlier. And in the aggregate, I think they decided now or never. That's why this happened. Don't know if Bergdahl walked away, was captured, deserted, or simply wandered. We may never know that.
It's interesting, Gene, as Jerry says, talked about for years. The New York Times, the editorial this morning says that Senator John McCain was open to the idea that prisoner exchange for Bowe Bergdahl, and yet, as soon as it happened, he went home and back. How do you see what's happening? Is the reaction to exchange purely political, or are there good reasons to complain?
Well, I think the Congress concern they were not alert is an issue that they consider whether President comply with 30 days or not, some dispute, and certainly doesn't seem comply with circumstances the White House is doing at the moment. The White House has said it couldn't alert Congress because how that threatened to kill Bergdahl if any time occurred. That was kind of a late explanation. They tell everybody that straight up. That came later on, and I think if you look at record, Senator Feinstein and Chairman Rogers, how they have been briefed on many separate things. Years, they've never leaked anything. Their trust issue there should have probably been there, and those in particular have that stand claim. A lot of this is there were plenty of conservatives on Fox and else things about fighting to get Bergdahl back, bring him home, just in months ago. Now all of a sudden, worst deal they've ever seen. And the only reason to give it like that is because the president did it, and second, because of these 4 or 5 soldiers who served him came out so quickly, identified him as a negative threat, and changed the storyline from bringing into the war, bringing home our one POW to something a lot
Hey, how do you see it?
John McCain, what he said was, in principle, open, but it would depend on the details. I think that depend on the details is a lot of work, but I think it's fair for him to say now that he's being characterized. Not entirely political. It is wrapped up in 2 huge policy questions that are intricately connected. One is the end of combat operations, and I would say that one of the factors that the White House swap now, so they're trying to wind it down by the end of the year. So there's big policy question. Undeniably politically shaped, as you mentioned, a lot of retroactive Twitter deletions. There are people who flip 180 degrees, but I don't think entirely.
There are people who are very concerned, and take into that for kidnapping others.
Sure, I would say to those who've been in war for an awfully long time in Afghanistan, I don't think it's new rely on capturing Americans. The Israelis have bodies of Israelis hundreds of thousands. I don't think this adds any major element of risk to the Americans who are already facing deadly combat
And
almost every
the
day.
underlying assumption there that because Taliban may not negotiate with them, not trying to capture them. Of course, I mean, they can capture us, they will. They're at war, kill them. So how does this increase odds of capture when that's part of?
Well, I think it's important to distinguish prisoners. I think the administration would have probably better getting or and that's what that's not really the way. So I also think he probably would consider intelligence stuff. I think it would that might have those happen over again. They might not.
So the PR part of this done
Yeah.
really
But they
kind
were-
of done the wrong
But
way.
they were expecting blowback on release. They were expecting blowback on the question of what to do. I don't think they should have expected some kind of blowback on Bowe Bergdahl did history running appearance. They were clearly anticipating all this personalized stuff, having the parents of the president sign. To me, they sound it just looks like they were trying to counter the Guantanamo complaints, not the Bergdahl. That's a good point, and I think notion, which is they articulated very well in the Pentagon was we do not lose that that I spoke this week a couple of days ago actually with Stanley Preston, the commander of the Afghan Corps at the time that Bowe Bergdahl was taken. Preston ordered a massive search rescue or recovery effort to find Bowe Bergdahl. He said two things about this. One was that we don't leave Americans behind. So very passionate about it. Then he added, are there details about this? Very.
Now, what about the notion that 6 Americans were killed in search for Bowe Bergdahl? What do we know in fact about that, Olivier?
Well, what we're seeing is a sort of a drip of information about that, where the initial reports that there were 6 Americans killed and many search for Bowe Bergdahl. Some of the people who were reported as having been killed in the search for Sergeant and Private Bergdahl appear to have been other operators. Were not some of them connected to Afghan elections. There's regular combat operators. So the picture's emerging slowly from Afghanistan. What happened?
It was so interesting. In public sees and hears one aspect of this. Well, clearly can read among the tea leaves. What do you think the impression in American country is on the plot of Bowe Bergdahl 5 centuries Taliban?
Well, I think that I don't mean to speak public without having shadow on my hands. No one's serving. My experience in dealing with average folks out there, not of watching, that there are very compassionate and they are caring and that they would want their child to come home. And so I think that the idea in the long run, when we do start getting back from the
topic. We come back. I look forward to hearing from you. And welcome back to the National Hour by Roundup. This is being video streamed, so if you'd like to see it as well as listen to it, go to drshow.org and watch video stream. Here's an email on Bowe Bergdahl. It's from John in Franklin, North Carolina, who says, I'm disappointed. One of the commentators said, in effect, you may never know the truth about Bergdahl. I don't think that's a correct statement unless the Army refused to examine actions on stage the June after Bergdahl's capture. If this Bergdahl is deserter, the Army should hold him accountable. That has to stand living.
Well, I think that's a fair point. The story is far from over. The whole point of the last couple of days, at least in the official communications from the Army, is they're going to conduct an inquiry, a full inquiry. They're going to talk to Sergeant Bergdahl. They're going to get down to drill down into the details of the night that he appeared. There's a pretty solid chance that obviously, if they come up with misconduct, he'll face a court martial. There's precedent.
I find myself wondering why the video that apparently shows Sergeant Bergdahl in such dire physical shape has been classified as far why the American public has not been allowed to see that on which the president and his son base their decisions here.
It's a good question. Similarly interesting classified again, 30-some page investigation, fairly thorough, apparently done at the time. The contemporaneous appearance, that's classified as well. Described it, but it hasn't been released. I suspect eventually, just not done.
By a long shot.
There is discussion in the White House starting yesterday about maybe as to the Pentagon report that was the initial investigation, which, as Jerry said, many in the media quite so, and does and does prove that he left his own will. But they stop short of applying any motivation together. They don't go there because they have to solve the they have to find out what happened. That's one of the reasons that it will be difficult to know because we don't know if Bergdahl will remember with clarity.
That's a good point.
There's also one other point here that's important to remember that we haven't mentioned here, which is that one of the motivations had all along a dialogue with the Taliban might, or at least parts of the Taliban that might have much broader implications, good ones, for the future of Afghanistan. That there's an attempt here to use this process to build credibility on both sides, business with each other, because eventually I think the feeling is going to have to come Afghanistan stabilize. So one of the reasons all these things, including earlier investigation, is administration views this context, whether we can establish or convince the Taliban that we will conduct good faith and they will conduct good faith negotiations with us. So there's an added layer of sensitivity as well.
And I know we spent the entire hour on Bowe Bergdahl, but there are May job numbers out there. Olivier and American employers. Now, what does that tell us about the stage of the economy? Are we truly on a steady ramp to recovery, or are those who are no longer applying for jobs facing the economy down?
Well, it's a pretty good number. It's the fourth straight month, 100,000 jobs added at the first time in 2000. It also marks an important labor market that it finally recovered the 8.7 jobs lost in recession. You're right, the labor participation rate is concerning. About as many people return to the labor force as got jobs. That's true. But I think we're still at the lowest labor participation, and that's the number you hear a lot from Republicans who say, look, the unemployment figures don't count. There are so many people who are discouraged, who are not looking for employment, therefore who are not counted in the 3%.
So, Jean, what is
Well, I think it is a steady ramp, not recovery has been slow, and that's part of a pattern that we've seen for over 20 years. After recession time, recovery has gotten longer, slower, and this is very good. But we have for several quarters now been moving in a positive direction, but not fast.
One of the interesting things about this number, 217,000 jobs added, 216,000 all up in the private sector. One of the things that I think is good look at how much decline government did jobs.
why has that happened?
Well, government's recession started to run out of money, and not just the federal government, more importantly, state and city governments. They stopped hiring, laid off. That's a huge drag on the overall economy. This month tells you not moving into the plus category by much, but at least stop the drag. The good news is that most of the jobs are created in the private sector. All the jobs are private. Everybody would that have happened. The other thing that the administration is happy about here is that you're seeing a sign that the drag of government may at last.
There were times last year when the number of jobs created in the private sector was offset by the number of jobs lost when state government really became off in action.
But state government and the federal government had not done hiring yet.
States have to some extent, yeah.
Good.
But more importantly, as Jean suggests, they've stopped laying off. They've stopped cutting back, and you have to start somewhere. And the starting point is don't be a drag anymore on the national economy. That's
Okay. And being coming the scandal at the VA has certainly been one of the ongoing stories of the last few months. And now there apparently is a new bipartisan deal announced that would give the acting secretary of the VA more power. Tell us.
There are three important elements of the legislation, although they're going to get bigger. Still have a chance of life, and so talking Christmas, people are going to be adding to this. But the three really core elements of it, they allow the secretary to fire them go outside of the school.
I see. And Olivia, you mentioned you talked with General Crystal. I gather he took himself out of the run.
He did. He said that whoever takes over the troubled VA have a unique set of skills. Modestly, I think that he doesn't have, except required the wrong guy. He cares enough about the VA that he doesn't want to have the wrong guy ahead of it. And he doesn't was two things. One was that what the message this has sent to veterans that it's valued their service, valued their sacrifice. He's very sensitive to that. The other thing he said was that he hoped that whoever gets installed there has freedom of action. He's given freedom of action.
I wonder what that means.
I think in part it means what we're seeing in this proposal, in this legislation. It means the ability to hire, fire, promote with greater flexibility. I also think it means the additional resources, frankly, the additional money that would give whoever that is more flexibility.
Of course, my question, what doctors are going to want to go to the VA under the kinds of restrictions they face? But Jerry, more importantly, right now, is in line for this tough job.
Well, it appears that the leading candidate at the moment is a doctor named Toby Cosgrove, who's chief executive of the Cleveland Clinic, with extreme development.
And a veteran.
And a veteran, Vietnam War, former U.S. Air Force heart surgeon, who's run the Cleveland Clinic, which is a well-respected institution. That's not announced. He seems to be at the top of the White House list. There are other names floating around. One of the more interesting ones I heard this week is Don Shalala, who's the Just Secretary, now is the head of the and who got involved in a mission that helped sort out the earlier scandal. So you need, but I think what somebody like that or Dr. Cosgrove brings to the table is above all experience running big companies. And the VA is nothing.
What about Tammy Duckworth?
Yeah, that's a House member who is also a veteran named as well. But as Jerry just touched on, I think what is the most important thing for the White House to have in mind, and that is scale. The VA is just gigantic. And, Dr. Cosgrove has an excellent record, innovative, apparently a great doctor who created medical devices that seems like a really brilliant person. But the Cleveland Clinic handles 5.5 million patients last year. The VA, 80. The Cleveland Clinic has 40,000 workers. The VA has 338,000 workers. It is the scale of it is, I think, what is the problem. It's so a hospital in Phoenix can whatever, and it would take they're a needle in a haystack, and trying to track that kind of stuff is difficult. So the skill set that the White House will be searching for should include someone with an extraordinary ability to look at a giant place, figure out what kind of layers of leadership need to be installed in order to maintain it and keep an eye on it.
Jean Cummings, Bloomberg News, and you're listening to the Diane Rehm Show. Jerry Seib, what is the takeaway from the primaries that we've had this week? The Tea Party versus the establishment, for example, in Mississippi.
Well, it was for the people in the Tea Party who wanted one big day that they could talk about in this primary season. They haven't had many. They may have gotten it in Mississippi, where Chris McDaniel, who's a Tea Party favorite, barely edged out in the primary Thad Cochran, the incumbent Republican senator, and somebody.
But not quite.
But not quite. There has to be a runoff. He beat him. It was essentially a tie between the two, but they neither got over 50%, so there'll have to be a runoff on June 24th. The conventional wisdom says if you go to a runoff, the challenger and the guy who's leading an insurgency has the advantage because his people are very motivated to show up on a day when nobody expected to have to vote, and the people who are supporting the incumbent tend to sort of yawn and stay home, and that may or may not be true in Mississippi. We'll find out soon. Democrats would like to think that the infighting, which will now go on for weeks and expend more Republican dollars, makes Mississippi at least a possible pickoff for them. I still think it's hard to imagine a Democrat winning a statewide race in Mississippi right now, but that's what happened in Mississippi. I would just add as a footnote, the better news for Republicans on primary night, I think, came in Iowa, where a very good candidate emerged to run for an open Senate seat that's being held by Tom Harkin, who's now retiring. Joni Ernst is a state senator, and she turned out to be a great candidate who came from nowhere to win that primary.
What do you think, Olivier?
I think that the Joni Ernst story is a really fascinating one. I think that she's best known for having run the most attention-grabbing political ad of the cycle. It was called Squeal, and it focused on her background, her ability to castrate hogs, and it drew a lot of attention, a lot of national attention. You talk to Republicans, though, on both the establishment and the Tea Party fronts, and you hear a lot about how Joni Ernst has really hit a sweet spot between the two, and that she's done a very good job. She's got all the insurgent credentials that she needs. Harley riding, pistol packing, hog castrating,
military veteran,
right? She has all these attributes, but she's really the establishment like the fact that she's an attention grabber, that she's smart, and she's a really good candidate, and the insurgents think they see one of themselves in her. She's really hit a really great sweet spot.
Jean.
Yeah, she definitely did. She had the support of the governor, who's very much aligned with the traditional wing of the Republican Party, Governor Branstad, and she was endorsed by Sarah Palin. So that's what she managed to do. And having, a united Republican Party electorate in Iowa will help her as she goes up against Congressman Braley, who is a very good politician himself, who had no trouble in his primary. So he's well funded and rested.
And Romney's former presidential nominee, Mitt Romney's candidates did well.
They did. Mitt Romney's still telling people that he's not interested in running again, but he certainly is leveraging his profile and his resources pretty capably here. I wonder whether we're going to get a boomlet of, gee, should Romney try to run again?
Oh, dear.
The people I've talked to sort of near him have said, no, I don't think that's in the cards. But it is interesting to see how he's leveraging his influence.
One of the things that's also important about Mississippi is that this is a big for the Tea Party, because the establishment wing had them on their heels. And that loss in Mississippi, if Kern had won, that had been the prelude to 3 or 4 serious House races that are coming up, and now they're back.
Jean Cummings, Bloomberg News. Short break. When we come back, we'll open the phone. Stay with us.
National broadcast of the Diane Rehm Show is made possible in part by Unisys Corporation, maker of Unisys Stealth cybersecurity software. You can't hack what you can't see. Learn more at unisys.com/stealth. By the Pew Charitable Trusts, driven by the power of knowledge to solve today's most challenging problems, at pewtrusts.org. And by Road Scholar, with educational travel adventures to 150 countries, including Cuba, at roadscholar.org. This is NPR.
On the next Diane Rehm Show, the Friday News Roundup. World leaders meet in Normandy to commemorate the 70th anniversary of D-Day. Afghan's President Karzai condemns the Taliban prisoner swap for Bowe Bergdahl, and tens of thousands in Hong Kong gathered to mark the Tiananmen Square massacre. The Diane Rehm Show, next hour. And welcome back to the National Hour of our Friday News Roundup with Jerry Seib at the Wall Street Journal, Gene Cummings of Bloomberg News, Olivier Knox of Yahoo News. Jerry, a number of people have written in asking us about whether John McCain, while he was held prisoner by the Viet Cong, was traded for Viet Cong prisoners. I think the answer is no.
Well, no. I mean, this real story there is that John McCain, while a prisoner, resisted or refused to allow himself to be released as a propaganda tool because he was the son of a famous American admiral multiple times while he was in the POW camp in the Hanoi Hilton.
Because he would have been released before others
Correct.
With whom he was there.
Right, and he decided that was a dishonorable thing to do, so he stayed in the camp, refused to be released, and then in the end, he, like many others, was released as the war came to a conclusion, as the Paris peace talks concluded. Part of that was a release of prisoners, an exchange of prisoners generally. So that was not really a trade. That was a release of prisoners, and John McCain was released then because he refused to allow himself to be released earlier.
Do you want to add anything, Olivier?
Yeah, we started this conversation by noting the New York Times editorial about Mr. McCain's alleged change in position, and they really mischaracterized his position both before the trade and after the trade. As I said at the top, he said that he would generally be inclined to favor a trade depending on the details. Well, that matters. Depending on the details does matter. 5 Taliban, 10 Taliban, 30 Taliban. These sorts of details matter. And then afterwards, he didn't immediately denounce this agreement, this trade. He built up to that, and he said after looking at the evidence of what he knows, he criticized it. So that was a bit of an unfair shot today.
All right, let's open the phones. 800-433-8850. First to Kelly in Port Orange, Florida. Hi there, you're on the air.
Hi, Diane. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Regarding Sergeant Bergdahl, no one knows the whole story until there's more information. We're hearing politicians like Senator McCain and others that these 5 Taliban are a high risk, the hardest of the hardcore, are responsible for killing our soldiers. 3,000 Americans were killed on 9/11 because of the most dangerous threat, Osama bin Laden. We were supposed to catch bin Laden in Afghanistan. Somehow he escaped at Tora Bora. So for 7 years, bin Laden was a free man. How much damage to our troops was he responsible for during that time? I don't remember Congress calling out George W. Bush to catch the most dangerous terrorist in history. President Obama did.
All right, thanks for your call, Jean.
Well, Kelly does raise an interesting point, and that's if you look at the 5 that were in this as part of this exchange. 4 of them are Taliban, and only one of them really has ties to Al-Qaeda. And, there are many things that led up to this decision, lots of circumstances. As Jerry said, years in the making. But among the things that had changed was that the Taliban is a lot weaker in Afghanistan now than it was, say, 3 years ago. The Afghanistan forces are a little bit better than they were. The time frame of the war, it's almost done. The president's determined to have almost everybody out except for trainers. And these Taliban folks at Guantanamo Bay, at some point, were going to have to be released. So part of it was, what do we get in exchange for them? Is this an opportunity, in addition to potentially some of the political and diplomatic gains that Jerry spoke of earlier in the program?
Olivier.
I would just add that in 2004 and 2008, the Democrats made a lot out of the fact that bin Laden had escaped and had not been brought to justice. So actually, members of Congress and national Democrats had really been pounding the Bush administration for this. One of the big rationales of Obama's victory in 2008 was that the Bushies had taken their eyes off the good war, quote unquote, of Afghanistan in order to fight the bad war in Iraq, and this had let bin Laden escape, run free, and what have you.
All right, to Lisa in Dayton, Ohio. Hi there, you're on the air.
Oh, thank you for taking my call. It's quite an honor. I was calling regarding to the VA system, and it was addressed when you mentioned that Dr. Cosgrove would be in consideration to head the VA medical system, I think that one of the things that's very important in restructuring the program is for a physician executive who has experience and an understanding of a complex system, how to provide the support that the physicians need to work more efficiently. One of the comments that I heard today from one of the Republican congressmen was physicians just need to work more efficiently. And my husband was in the military for 30 years, and then he had a contract position and to provide care for military dependents. And one of the things that was very frustrating was that in order to control costs, support staff and payroll was one of the first things to be cut. And so it's very hard for a physician to be efficient when he doesn't have the support staff. He has to bring the patient back to the room. He has to set up the room. He has to make up his own biopsy tray. He has to do a lot of things that techs need to do. And so I think the question should be, how can the system be in place for the physician to be efficient?
Indeed. Jerry.
Well, I think Lisa makes a really good point, and I suspect most people who know the VA in Washington would totally agree with her. That most people will tell you that once you get through, in fact, President Obama said this, that once you get through the maze and off the waiting list and into the VA system, your health care tends to be pretty good. Now, we did a story in the Journal this week that said that's not universally true. There's actually a lot of variation among VA centers in terms of quality of care. So there are problems in the healthcare delivery segment of the operation as well. But most people realize the failure has been one of kind of administrative ease of administration and quality and competence of administration, and that's really where I think you're going to see most of the attention focused.
All right. One more subject today. I want to ask you all about General Motors' internal review. Yesterday, the internal investigation into its handling of a defective ignition switch was released. What did we learn, Jerry?
Well, it was a pretty scathing review that said essentially this question of what went wrong here bounced around inside GM from committee to committee with nobody taking responsibility for fixing it for years. So on that level, it was pretty tough, and the new GM CEO, Mary Barra, admitted it was a pretty tough and unflattering portrait of GM. There's a minority view on this. Senator Blumenthal from Connecticut articulated it probably best yesterday, in which he said, well, this is great that it's to come clean, but on the other hand, it's interesting that all the top executives came off clean. They're not taking the fall. Some lower level people are being blamed and they're being pushed out. So is that a tough report, or is that a kind of a whitewash of the people at the top? You get your choice.
Olivier.
13 deaths, 47 crashes, a problem that stretched over a decade. As Jerry points out, the very top executives at GM don't seem to be implicated in their internal report. There's no way that Congress is just going to let this lie. I think there was talk yesterday from some senators that they were impressed with the report. They thought it was it was good for GM to come clean. I just can't see Congress letting this one go completely. Just because of the length, the duration of the problem, and the seriousness of it.
So Mary Barra stays where she is. Top executives stay where they are. What's fascinating to me is that sales of GM products during May have gone sky high.
Well, it is, and that's important for the company to deal with this as quickly as they can. It is true that the hierarchy is remaining in place. In part, that's because some of them weren't even there when, including Mary Barrow, and in her position when this happened. There's one piece of the report that talks about the CEO or another high-level executive may have seen a video illustrating the flaws with the switch, but he was gone 3 weeks later when the Obama and the White House came in and took over the company. So there was a lot going on at the time that there might have been an opportunity to catch what was happening with this ignition. It also coincided with the financial collapse of the country. So there's a lot of bad things that all came together. The one turning point the report seems to identify is in 2006, when an engineer actually decided to redesign the switch because it had become so problematic. And somehow that redesign was not sent up through the chain of command, which would have triggered someone to say, well, then what do? We got to recall the old ones. That seems to me to be the biggest miscommunication. That was their best moment to catch what was happening.
So, as with Sergeant Bergdahl, will there be further hearings?
Oh, yeah, they're already scheduled.
There are
going to be hearings in the House and the Senate.
And back to Bergdahl, hearings scheduled on that swap.
Oh my gosh, yes. I think you can rest assured you can hear about Bergdahl issues for months to come. But I think, as Olivier said first on this discussion, that this probably moves into the military justice system, and so that will curtail what people will be willing to say in a public forum, and that may be the ultimate way this is adjudicated, if that's the right word.
To Mansour in Houston, Texas, you're on the air.
Hi, Diane. First of all, thank you very much for taking my call.
Certainly.
Well, the question I have, actually, the comment I have on Sergeant Bergdahl, he volunteered to protect the very people in the country who are criticizing him right now. We don't know what happened with him, whether he left, the only person who can left in the wilderness of Afghanistan would be somebody with a mental health issues, or he was captured. And on the other hand, we have 5 Taliban, which we have no hardcore evidence to prosecute them. They will be in our system forever if we don't end up releasing them. So we have a prisoner of war, and we have an opportunity to bring him back home and then bring him back to justice and figure out what happened with him. I really don't know why the Republicans are making this a more like a political issue than just the issue the way it is.
Olivier.
Well, part of the answer to why Republicans are making this an issue, I would say there are 2 different wings of the response. One is politics. The president held a Rose Garden event. Some of the president's aides insisted that Bergdahl had served with honor and distinction, even though there were questions about the circumstances of his disappearance. And that raised it into a political issue immediately. The other half is the policy question, which is, what do you do about Guantanamo Bay? How do you wind down the war effort in Afghanistan? And those are pretty substantial questions of policy that they're going to be working out all year.
And we'll be talking about just those issues during our first hour on Monday. And you're listening to the Diane Rehm Show. And let's go to Jim in Spring Lake, North Carolina. Hi there.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I get that, the Republicans don't want the president to look good on this. And I get that, this has got to be a political issue because he didn't seek their permission first through Congress. But isn't one American life worth 5 Taliban? I mean, to me, I'd like your panel to answer, what is it that I'm to be afraid of from these 5 Taliban? And why should I value what they can do over the soldier that went over to protect our freedom, regardless of what he did when he got there?
Well, Jim sums up, I think, a lot of the debate and the ultimate conclusion within the administration, that the staying true to the idea that we don't leave folks behind, honoring the fact that he volunteered. Sources have said the initial report that the Pentagon did on this found that while he was a little quirky, he was a pretty good soldier. He showed up on time. He was dressed in uniform.
He wandered away.
He was a little quirky. He wandered away a couple of times and then came back.
Right.
So, but they didn't view him as a big problem. And so what do we owe him and his family for the sacrifices that they did make? And versus, these 5 prisoners who are now 12 years older, have not been part of the leadership for a long time. The iPhone wasn't even invented when they went in. So much has changed. And, really how dangerous might they be?
All right, a couple of other comments. Donald in Peoria has said you ought to divide the chairmanship of the VA into Eastern and Western divisions. It's too big a job for one person if we want to minimize bureaucracy. Does that make sense, Jerry?
I have to admit, I don't know enough about the way the VA runs to know what makes sense. There's another possible division. There's part of the VA that handles disability benefits and other veterans programs, and the part that handles only health care. And that's there is a kind of a division within on that. Maybe the healthcare system ought to stand alone as its own agency. I think these are existential questions about the VA that everybody's going to look at. Now, they've been danced around for years. I think if there's a silver lining in this cloud, is that they'll now be addressed head on.
One other email from Jeff, who says, I understand the political realities of getting a left kid, but if we want our Congress to start working, we need to focus more on whether Joni Ernst will make a good legislator and not devote the entire discussion to the quality of her candidacy.
I think that's a great point, but I think that the candidacy is in part, a proving ground where you lay out your principles and you submit your record to scrutiny for the voters. And so I think they're not unrelated. I get why my fondness for the theatricality of the campaign might rub Jeff the wrong way. Particularly given the subject matter of
At the
that.
same time, we have to say she won 56% of the vote.
But here's what we're going to hear running from now through the election. Bruce Braley, the Democrat, is going to be hammering away at the fact that she missed a lot of votes as a state senator. So we are going to hear about that.
Olivier Knox of Yahoo News, Gene Cummings, Bloomberg News, Jerry Seib of the Wall Street Journal. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Diane.
Thank you.
And thanks for listening all. I'm Diane Rehm.
The Diane Rehm Show is produced by Sandra Pinkert, Denise Couture, Susan Casey Neighbors, Rebecca Kaufman, Lisa Dunn, Danielle Knight, and Allison Brody. The engineer is Toby Schreiner. Natalie Urv-Lifker answers the phones. Visit drshow.org for audio archives, transcripts, and podcasts. Call 202-885-1200 for more information. Our email address is drshow@wamu.org, and we're on Facebook and Twitter. This program comes to you from American University in Washington, D.C. This is NPR.